Karen Rademacher here, and I'd like to share with you some of the highlights from our trip to Sweden in 2013. I traveled to Sweden with my husband Dale and with my parents Stan and Betty Rudeen. One of the purposes of our trip was to pick up a Volvo that Dad had ordered for pickup at the factory in Gothenburg, Sweden. Volvo has an overseas delivery program, and when you order your Volvo for pickup in Sweden, they'll fly you there, put you up in a hotel. You pick up the Volvo at the factory, they feed you a traditional Swedish lunch, and the car is yours to drive around Sweden for up to 6 weeks. And Volvo provides for all the insurance and registration, so it's a nifty way to drive Sweden without the expense of a rental car. If you're inclined to be purchasing a Volvo automobile, so highly recommend it. We made an itinerary to visit all of the family connections that we could, and we even added a stop on behalf of the Johnson family. It turns out that portions of the Johnson family are from a part of Sweden just a half hour away from where some of Betty's ancestors were from. Prior to leaving, we researched and found a 1903 passenger list for the Oscar II ocean liner, and this list was made on the 21st of September 1903, and passengers on that list included Selma Marberg and her little brother Klaus Edwin. And what's important about this document is it shows the exact name of the parish where they came from. It says Skonings Osaka, and pardon my Swedish, in Skaraborg County, and we were able to find that on a map. We also looked at the church records for baptisms in that parish, and we found the baptism of Klaus Edwin, and his father was Alfred Marberg, and his mother was Emma Christina Johansdotter. And what's important is it also shows the name of the farm, Ranåker. And so we made plans to visit the church and the farm and take some pictures to share with all of you. This is the church, and it was undergoing some rather extensive renovations, so it's being well maintained. Very beautiful grounds, lots of trees, manicured lawn areas, and raked gravel paths, just quite lovely. We did look around the cemetery a little while to see if we could perhaps find a grave for Ed's mother, and we didn't find one, but time prevented us from really thoroughly scouring the entire cemetery. This is what the church looks like from a distance. This is really, we thought, one of the most beautiful areas of Sweden, and many of the churches sit up on prominent hills like this church does, so really quite charming. Next we went looking for the farm, and it's probably a mile or two away from the church. And here's one of the buildings on the farm, and you can see this little sign down here, Ranåker, but it's actually pointing a mile the other way to a Vindkraftverk, and when we looked in that direction we saw that it was referencing a windmill farm by the same name. But here's what the farm looks like from a distance. It's still a working farm, very well maintained, very beautiful grounds, beautiful crops, so it's neat to see that still continuing today. Something else we noticed on the grounds of the farmhouse were these little robotic lawnmowers. There were 3 of these guys tootling around the lawn independently. In fact, there was probably no one home. We actually saw quite a few of these in Sweden, so I guess that's a coming attraction, courtesy of those crafty Swedes, automatic lawn mowing. Another stop on our itinerary was the Ekket Farm. This is the farm that the Rudeen family was on for at least 3 generations. My grandparents, Lawrence and Clorinda, had this photo hanging on their wall, and on the back of the photo it said Ekket and it's a wood frame house with a rocky foreground and some sheep grazing in the yard. In 1989, Warren Rudeen and Myron Rudeen traveled to Sweden, and they went to Ekket, and this building was still standing at that time. And here's a photo, and let me go back. You can see there's a little lean-to on the right side, a chimney, the window up close to the eaves, and when you look at that old picture, you see the same features. So I'm pretty sure this is the same building that was there when my great-grandfather Gust Rudeen lived there. At the time that Warren and Myron were visiting, the owners of the farm at that time, who were not relatives, were living in this house, but they were building a new farmhouse nearby, and it was almost completed. When Dale, my parents, and I visited last summer, of course, this farmhouse is still standing and is absolutely charming and in good repair. The Ekket Farm, even though it's no longer in the family, is in good hands and being well maintained. The top of the farm is pretty heavily wooded and just absolutely beautiful. And then looking down towards the lake, you can see again the rocky features in the foreground, but a beautiful barn. The current owners are into horses as a hobby, and this barn here in the foreground is probably nicer than my house. Here's one of their horses standing out in the pasture. But an absolutely beautiful setting, and kind of makes you wonder why they felt they had to leave. But Augusta's family, who we'll talk about in a minute, was from the other side of the lake in this area, and the Rudeens were on the Ekket farm here. The word Ekket translates as oak, and here's a stand of oak trees on the property. There were actually several groves of these, so it was neat to see the connection between the features on the farm and the name of the farm. The Ekket Farm is right next door to the church property, the Marberg church. As I mentioned, Rudeens have been on the Ekket Farm for at least 3 generations, but our Rudeen ancestors were going to the Marberg church for as far back as we have records for this church. So this is truly an important destination for a Rudeen to visit in Sweden. Here's the church. The steeple structure on the left is relatively new, less than 150 years old. But the central part of the church with the tile roof is very old, dates back to the 11 or 1200s. So a very ancient structure on the shores of the lake here. The records at this church begin in the 1600s. Of course, when Myron and Warren were visiting in 1989, they stopped in the church, and here's Myron inside the church. You can see the painted ceiling, which is a impressive feature inside this church. Myron, of course, would be a grandson of Gust Rudeen, who was baptized in this church. And here's myself and my dad. My dad is another grandson of Gust Rudeen, and I'm a great-granddaughter. So it was quite an honor to stand in this church where so many generations of Rudeens had been before us. Hanging on the walls of the church were lists of all the pastors who had served this church. And number 24th on the list was Sven Axel Sundberg, born in Marberg in 1840. So he was a local boy. He served as pastor from 1874 until 1890. And Gust Rudeen left this church in 1882 to come to America. And when he left, he was given by the pastor a paper that showed all the particulars about his birth date, his baptism, his confirmation. And of course, when we zoom in on it, we see that it was signed, in fact, by Axel Sundberg. So it's pretty exciting as a genealogist to have my research confirmed on the ground by that poster on the wall. Here's a close-up of the painted ceilings, and they're just charming. They're historically significant. I'll be telling you at the end about my blog. I've done a little bit of research into what all these paintings are about. So at the end I'll give you the address, but absolutely beautiful paintings inside the church. Our next stop was the Nobinus Manor House, and Gust Rudeen's wife, Augusta, her parents worked at this manor house. Again, before we left, we did some research. Here are records from the Marberg church that lists all the inhabitants of Nobinus. It goes across several pages, but all the maids are listed on page 252, and the very first maid on the list is Clara Fredrika Gustafsdotter. And over here on the right, if we zoom in on that, it says that she was married to the farmhand from page 251, Gustav A. Carlson. And then on the 29th of June, 1856, a daughter was born, baptized on the 30th of June, named Augusta Mathilda. So this is our great-grandmother, Augusta Rudeen, and her parents. I think of it as some sort of a Downton Abbey romance where the hired help meet and marry while working at this fancy manor house. During the time that Clara and Gustav were working there, let me back up. We decided to research this manor house and possibly include it in our itinerary, and we just Google Nobinus, and right away it goes to their website. So in fact, it is still standing, and it's a bed and breakfast. So we booked our reservations to stay there. The website lists all the attractions at the manor house. It's they have Frisian horses there. They have a bed and breakfast. They have a museum. They have a display of bakelite ceramics. So it looked like quite the place. And here we are, unloading the Volvo. The entire third floor of the manor house is the bed and breakfast. And you can see on the right here there's two vans, and these were guest workers from Estonia that were working on power lines in the area. They were staying at this end of the manor house, and we were staying at the other end. And you can see it's a little shabby. I think Nobinus has seen better days, but we were just excited to see it still standing, knowing that we had a family connection to it. When Clara and Gustav were working there, the lord of the manor was Malte Gustav Henrik Stjerngranat, and here's a photo of his living room during that time. And so we can picture our great-great-grandmother Clara dusting the furniture and keeping things tidy for the lord of the manor. His son was George Malte Stjerngranat, and this guy is Sweden's answer to Forrest Gump. He had a very interesting life. And again, if you follow my blog, I'll be sharing some information about this character in the coming weeks. It turns out actually that this Malta was financially irresponsible, and actually the manor house had to be sold due to his carelessness. And after it was lost, it was a cooking school at one time. It was a nursing home. It fell into disrepair. It was slated for demolition, and then the current owners got it. And here's a shot looking down the hallway of the bed and breakfast area. You can see it's not very fancy. In fact, the doors are kind of institutional. I think this dates back from the nursing home days of this property. So it was it was an experience, I'll say that. Here's the Bakelite display, and I'll just say it was disturbing. This was in the stairway, and we had to look at this mess going up and down the stairs to our room, but I guess it just added to the overall experience that we had there. Here's their Frisian stud out in the barn, and through stud fees, he generates income for the owners. It turns out that Nobiness Bed and Breakfast is quite the destination for the horse dressage community. They have out on the grounds this enclosed arena. There's a grandstand in there and a sound system, and they host a big midsummer event there with lots of people attending and staying in the Manor House. So that is the destiny of the Stierngrenet family's Manor House. At the end of our trip, Dad was insistent on washing the Nobiness dust off the Volvo, so here he is getting it all clean and ready to be shipped back to America. As I mentioned, I do have a blog where I post information about our family history, and I invite you to visit. The address is road13.com/family history. And I post on there maybe once or twice a week. Some of the information is about Dale's side of the family. Some of the information is about my mom's side of the family, but quite a bit is about the Rudeens. You can see there's a link here, subscribe to posts, and you'll get an email every time there's something new to read. So I invite you to visit and browse through the past posts and learn about our family's histories. Thanks for your time. Bye.